Hi, welcome back to Joshua's Diary. This is the last part, the end of the story. Pictured here are the Rocky Mountains. The Oregon Trail went through the Rocky Mountains. So when in the book they talk about getting to the Continental Divide before winter, you can see why, because those mountains are awfully big and a wagon would not be easy to get over. So let's begin by remembering this. Joshua's Diary started in March, and now we're in the end of June. So at first they were planning to go, and then they actually started the trip. So it's been months and months. June 30th. Tomorrow we have to ford a river that's running high. We'll turn the oxen free and float the wagons across. Tonight we spend hours adding more cork to the wagon box so that it will float. Pa says this time my job will be to stay in the wagon with Ma and Becky. I'll try to shift our belongings if the wagon tilts. Yay, I won't have to go in the water. July 1st. I'm so tired when we stop each day. We're all so tired. Even the oxen are exhausted and weak from the loads. Today, Cousin Daniel rode back along the trail. He said each wagon has to leave some heavy things behind. Uncle Arthur put his bureau and Aunt Lizzie's rocking chair out on the trail. Ma left her wedding trunk and framed pictures. Mrs. Gibbons left a baby cradle. I saw it rock in the wind, all empty and sad. Mrs. Meany said she wouldn't leave a single thing. I'm already as poor as a snake, she cried. Cousin Daniel started to say something, then he changed his mind. I wish he'd left Mrs. Meany behind. She is a snake. July 4th. For some reason, everyone seems happy tonight. After supper, music and dancing began. This time, some men joined in with the women, and then Charlie poked me. I stared. Grandpa, my grandpa, he was dancing with one of the sisters. It was Miss Emmeline. Later, I heard Ma tell Pa that Grandpa was making a fool of himself. Pa just smiled. I turned away from Ma because I was smiling too. July 5th. We're moving even slower now. Cousin Daniel pushes us. We're supposed to reach Independent Rock by yesterday, July 4th, Independence Day, so we're behind schedule. But not by much. It's awfully hot. It's as if all the days of August, July, and August got all rolled up into one. Sweetwater River. Another river crossing. Daniel says we'll cross it several more times. When Mr. Stewart made this trail, couldn't he make it straight? I bet he wasn't scared of water. If he had been, he'd never had done it this way. Independence Rock, July 6th. We are too tired to celebrate. South Pass. We've crossed the Continental Divide. On one side, the river flows to the east to the Atlantic. On the other side, the rivers flow west to the Pacific. Pa tells me that's why it's called the Divide. I should feel excited. I just feel tired. Ice off. We found ice. Yes, truly. Here in the winter, the river backs up and fills up the land. It freezes deep down. You can cut down into it and find ice. I cut deep and came up with an ice chunk and gave it to Bobby. She thanked me, but her voice was as cold as the ice. She didn't even look at me. I threw an ice chunk at Charlie and missed and almost hit Mrs. Meany. She ducked under that ugly blue thing she's knitting, and she howled like a wolf. I said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Meany, but I wasn't sorry. I'm not sorry. July 18th. 5 of our men are missing. They're the scouts who go ahead. They haven't come back from our wagon train tonight. We're afraid that something has happened to them. July 19th. The 5 are still missing. One of them is Mr. Gibbons, the father of January, February, and March babies. Mrs. Gibbons looks as if she's seen a ghost. She doesn't even speak tonight. July 21st. Mrs. Gibbons wept all night. I could hear her in her wagon. Ma took Becky and went to stay with her. Pa said the men were found, killed by arrows. Fort Hall, August 3rd. We are at the fort at last. For the past weeks we've been afraid, knowing that our men have been killed. But here there are Indians all about, just as at the other forts, and they are friendly. One Indian gave Pa a buffalo skin, just tossed it to him, and not for any reason. Pa went to our wagon and brought back some tobacco. He gave it to the Indian man. That bully, Mr. West, he told Pa he had no business exchanging gifts with Indians. Pa just ignored him, and then Pa and the Indian sat down and smoked their pipes together. It is confusing, but I do believe this. Indians are a lot like the rest of us. Some are good, and some are not. Fort Hill still. Here, some families will leave us. One part of the trail branches north to Oregon, the other goes south to California. The three Drucker wagons gather round. They plan to go to California, but now some say Oregon. At night they squabble among themselves, but they seem friendly about it all. I pray that they choose Oregon. I pray that Bobby will get over being mad at me. I'm so happy. August 6th. Bobby's family is staying on the North Trail with us. All their wagons chose to stick together. There will be lots of Druckers in Oregon. I hope they'll settle near us. I hope Bobby will talk to me soon. August 11th. I haven't written about Grandpa much because I don't see him often. He dropped back and spends his days with the sisters. Then tonight he suddenly appeared. He sat down to supper with Ma and Pa and me. He acted like he hadn't been gone a week. He was kind to old Mrs. Meany. For the first time ever, I saw her smile. She has no teeth. Afterward, Grandpa even helped Ma store the plates and cooking things. When it was time to bed down, Grandpa got his bedding and laid it next to mine. I waited for him to say something, but in minutes he was snoring while I lay awake. I wondered what he's planning. August 14th. Grandpa's been riding beside us for 3 whole days. He doesn't say much. It's like he has a secret. I keep waiting for him to tell me. I think I know what it is. I don't mind. Grandma's been dead a long time, and he's lonesome. But I wonder what Ma will say. Snake River. A terrible crossing, a treacherous crossing. My heart is thumping bad tonight. We had to cross a roaring river. The men chained the wagons together, one behind the other. Then teams of oxen were chained together to help pull. Like other times, horsemen rode alongside. They whipped and shouted at the oxen. Oh, but first we had to make the wagons more watertight. We used bedding and sheets soaked in tar. We even used our own clothing. We made it across. I stayed in the wagon with little Becky. Pa said I must. I was relieved, but now I'm sure that Pa knows that I'm scared. August. Hot, hot, hot. One of the hardest days yet. The sun was scorching. My arms are sunburned bad, even though Ma covers them with grease. Then in the midst of this blue sky, a storm broke out. The sky turned blacker than night. The wind whipped up and the horses tucked their tails underneath themselves. The oxen quivered. The wagon covers billowed. And then the rain came down. And ice, hail. It was so wicked we stopped. We took shelter as best we could. For an hour it raged. I've never seen a storm like this. In Missouri, we don't have storms like this. Grandpa and I huddled under the wagon. I didn't see Pa, but Ma was inside the wagon with Becky. I picked up a chunk of ice as big as a rock. I held it in my hands. I don't know why, I just did. I held it a long time. I wanted to see how long I could stand the pain. Tears came, but I held on to it. After a minute, Grandpa reached over and took my hand. He made me drop the ice chunk, but I couldn't stop the tears. Grandpa just held my hand. He held it for a long, long time. He said softly, "Don't fret. The end is in sight." I didn't answer, but inside my head thoughts ran around like little mice. Mr. Allison is dead. Mr. Gibbons got killed. Mr. West is vicious. And poor little babies are dead. My feet hurt. I'm hot. I'm cold. I'm scared of water. I'm scared of Indians. Practically every day I'm scared half to death. Bobby is mad at me, and I don't know why I care. Grandpa murmured, I know, as if he was listening in on my thoughts. I feel sad and horrid inside. Late August. Nights are cooler now. We find it easier to sleep, but Cousin Daniel says cold nights mean early winter. He's pushing us hard to make even more miles each day. Yet in the mountains, it's harder to move our wagons. It's also harder to walk. We go single file. It's especially hard walking because my shoes are worn out. Pa fixed them with strips of leather, but they flap and they trip me. I reread this diary. All I do is complain. I should be more like Ma or Adam. Ma didn't want to go, but now she makes the best of it. And Adam is quiet and prays. August 24th. Tonight when we camped, I looked close at Aunt Lizzie. She looked different. She's fat. And then I will be happy because I realize there will be a new baby in the family. In the Cascades. Tonight, something terrible and wonderful. We were high in the Cascade Mountains, partway up, and we had to ford another stream. It was swift and deep. Ma was in front of our wagon with Becky on her lap. Pa was on the far side of the water. I was in the water on the other side. Suddenly, our wagon began to tip. Pa pushed. Ma shouted, "Lean this way!" She shoved herself hard against the side of the wagon. I looked up at her, and as I looked, Becky tumbled from her lap. She fell into the raging river almost by my feet. Before I could grab her, she was swept downstream. I dove after her. I don't know what I was thinking. Nothing. She disappeared under the water. I dove under, too. I was swimming, but I don't know how to swim. Under the water, I saw her dress, a bit of white floating. I reached for it. I got it and pulled it to me. It was heavy. She was heavy. I held her to me. I lifted her up and struggled to shore. People were shouting. I could hear them. Becky's face was white and blue. She didn't make a sound. I shook her hard. I shook her again. "Wake up!" I yelled. She coughed. She spit water, and then she began to wail. She howled. I blinked back tears and hugged her tight. People crowded around. Someone took her from me. They handed her to Mom. My baby sister is alive tonight. Ma and Pa just hug me and hug me and hug me. Later, Pa told me I was very brave. I told him I was scared stiff. Pa said, "That's what courage is all about." Still later, I was sitting alone by the fire, and Bobby came and sat beside me. I wondered what she was up to, but I was too tired to care. All I could think about was Becky. After a long while, Bobby said, "You mad at me?" "No, you should be." "You should be," she said. "I was a ninny." I looked at her. "I was wrong about you being a chicken." "Oh, I don't know. I was scared stiff." "Yeah," she said. "I'm scared too." "Of what?" She waved her hand around. "This. I'm tired and scared. Do you think we'll ever get there?" I nodded. "I think so," I said. "I think we will." Cascades still. Up and over the Cascades. Soon we be where we set out to be. Pod did a count. He said about 1 of every 15 people who started out have died. And we've lost more oxen and cows and mules than you can shake a stick at. But we're almost there. "Home," says Pa. "Home? We left our home behind." Mid-September. When we make camp, we're too tired to even talk. People just eat and then bed down. Mrs. Hull is like a mother hen to Mrs. Gibbons. She fusses around. It's like she's adopted all 3 of them, January and February, and Mrs. Gibbons too. I think Mrs. Hull has a very big heart. Mr. West seems better behaved, but Ma said Mrs. West should sleep with a frying pan by her side from now on. A cold night and raining. Last night we stopped and we didn't unyoke the oxen. We were sure they'd run away. They're yearning for food and water and rest, so we let them sleep in their yokes, but this morning 2 were dead. Dead, but they've come so far with us. Ma promises it will be better when we get to the valley. I wonder how she can be so sure. Next day, I was gathering firewood by the stream when Papa came to me. Miss Emmeline was with him. He said, "I'm married, Josh boy." Just like that. "Reverend Jackson did the honors last night," he said. "This here is my bride." I just stared, and I said, "Oh," or something else just as brilliant. Miss Emmeline blushed. "Tell your ma," he said. "Me?" I said. Grandpa nodded and grinned. He said, I don't have your kind of courage, son. Later, I told Ma about Grandpa. She pulled her mouth into a tight line. No fool like an old fool, she said. Pa just winked at me. September 27th. I'm so happy to have Charlie and Adam and Bobby walking with me again, and even me too. He's maybe not as bad as he used to be. Things aren't so bad when you have friends. October. We're almost there. Pa says another day, maybe two. The end of the trail. We're so weary. The oxen are more weary. So everyone walks now, even the babies. Aunt Lizzie is getting big with child, but she walks too. Only Mrs. Meany rides, and she knits and complains. And poor Buster, the pads on his paws refuse to heal. So Bobby and Charlie and Adam and I take turns carrying him. Charlie is nice to Bobby now. I don't know why, but it makes me happy. It's bad when your friends don't like one another. Nighttime. We are over the Cascades. We've come to the valley. We feel the moisture in the air. It's so different from the plains. I think I should be happy. I am happy. We are where we set out to be, but I'm so tired. Morning. This morning we looked around. We seem to be on top of the world. The wind blows and the leaves dance. It's so different from St. Joseph. It's green, even now in October. Ma held Becky in her arms. She has hardly put Becky down since the river accident. She pointed out the valley and said, Well, what about that, Mr. McCullough? I think we made it, Mrs. McCullough, Pa answered, and then he turned and reached for me. We made it, Josh, he said. I nodded. We did, I said. Later still, soon we'll each choose and mark off our square mile of land. But for now, we set up tents. We all want to stop living in wagons. And Lizzie and Uncle Arthur put their tent right beside our own. Bobby's family put their tent on the other side. And then, it made me mad to see, but the Meanies took a place close by. Old Mrs. Meany is still as mean as she can be. I don't think the mountain air has changed her mood at all. Grandpa set his tent a long way off. The Hulls and the three Gibbonsons have made a place together. I'm glad that they care for one another. And to think, I had hated Frederick Hull. So we have a little neighborhood, just like back at the beginning of the trail. Next day, Grandpa came to our tent with Miss Emmeline. Is that what I should call her? I know I can't call her Grandma. Ma was inside, sweeping. She turned and saw them in the tent doorway. She brushed her hair out of her eyes. She looked at Miss Emmeline. She looked at her pa. No one spoke. And then, I'm so proud of Ma. She went right up to Miss Emmeline. She kissed her on the cheek. Not just one cheek, but two. Later. I can hardly believe this. At supper time, Mrs. Meany hobbled over to Ma. She handed Ma an armful of something blue and fluffy. That thing she'd been knitting the whole journey here. Here, she said, real gruff-like, a blanket. You're a good enough woman. And then she hobbled away. Ma just stood there. I believe she was stunned. After a minute, she stammered, Thank you. A good enough woman? I hardly know what to make of it. Early morning, October 12th. This morning, Pa picked up a paintbrush and a bucket of tar. He said he'd be thinking what to write on our wagon. He looked at Ma. Well, he said. Ma smiled. Go ahead, she said. What? He said. You know, she said. Pa just looked at her a minute, and then kind of quiet like he said, Home? Ma nodded. Home, she said. Pa looked at me. His eyebrows went up. I thought for a minute. Home? Was it home? It was strange. I looked around me. There was Becky and Ma and Pa and Grandpa and even Miss Emmeline and Aunt Lizzie and Uncle Arthur and Charlie and Bobby and everybody. I smiled. I took a deep breath and nodded. Pa turned back to the wagon, and he painted across the back, Home. We are home. I do think that those are the best words ever. And I'm going to end with a picture of a valley in Oregon. I do not know if this is where Joshua's family left, but you can see how green and beautiful it is. I hope you enjoyed this story of historical fiction. Of course, most of it is made up, but some of it really happened to somebody who was so brave so long ago.